Dad asked, "Why are you walking?" When he saw me arriving at his house soaking wet from the rain, and I told him my husband's mother hid my keys to keep me trapped at her house during Sunday lunch because I refused to hand over my paycheck for family expenses. She had smiled and said, "You're not leaving until you learn respect," while Declan pretended to be asleep on the couch. My name is Sienna, I'm 29 years old, and 3 hours ago I walked 4 miles in a thunderstorm after my mother-in-law literally imprisoned me in her home. The water still drips from my clothes onto Dad's hardwood floor, forming a puddle that looks smaller than the rage building in my chest. My father's face goes from confusion to fury as he processes what I just said. "She did what?" Vincent's voice is deadly quiet in that way that used to terrify me as a teenager when I'd broken curfew. But this isn't about me being irresponsible. This is about Vera crossing a line so extreme that even I, who've spent 2 years making excuses for her controlling behavior, can't rationalize it away anymore. I met Declan 3 years ago at a hospital fundraiser where I was working as a pediatric nurse. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my career goals and aspirations. For the first 6 months, he was everything I dreamed of in a partner. He supported my decision to work night shifts for the pay differential, encouraged me to pursue my master's degree, and introduced me to his mother with genuine pride in his voice when he said, "This is the woman I'm going to marry." The warning signs started small. Vera would call during our dates, and Declan would always answer. She'd forget to tell me about family gatherings until the last minute, then act hurt when I couldn't attend due to my work schedule. She made comments about my clothes being too revealing, my career being too demanding, my student loans being too large. Declan would laugh it off as mom being mom and assure me she meant well. After we got married last year, the boundary violations escalated. Vera had a key to our apartment and would let herself in while I was at work, reorganizing my kitchen, throwing away food she deemed unhealthy, and once even rearranging my closet because my organizational system was chaotic. When I asked Declan to get the key back, he said I was being sensitive and that his mother was just trying to help. The financial control started 3 months ago. Vera suggested that since I made more than Declan as a nurse, we should pool our resources with her to build family wealth. The plan was for me to deposit my paycheck into an account she managed, and she'd distribute money as needed for bills and expenses. Declan thought it was a great idea, a way to save money and strengthen family bonds. I refused. I'd worked too hard to build my financial independence to hand it over to someone who demonstrated zero respect for my boundaries. My student loans were my responsibility. My savings goals were carefully planned, and I wasn't about to let Vera decide how much of my paycheck I could access. The refusal created a cold war in the family. Today's Sunday lunch was supposed to be a peace offering. Vera called yesterday, her voice sugary sweet, saying she wanted to apologize for overstepping and could we please come for a nice family meal. I was skeptical, but Declan begged me to give his mother another chance. He promised he'd stand up for me if she brought up the money issue again. The lunch started pleasantly enough. Vera served pot roast with all the fixings, made small talk about the weather and neighborhood gossip, and didn't mention finances once. I started to relax, thinking maybe she'd actually heard our concerns. Then, as I was helping clear the dishes, I noticed Declan had conveniently fallen asleep on her living room couch. That should have been my first clue. Declan never naps. He has insomnia and survives on coffee and sheer willpower. But there he was, sleeping so deeply that he didn't stir when I called his name. When I went to the entryway to get my purse and keys, my bag was there, but my keys were gone. I checked every pocket, dumped the contents on Vera's hall table, and found nothing. That's when she appeared behind me, arms crossed, wearing that smile that never reaches her eyes. "Looking for something?" she asked, and I knew immediately she'd taken them. "Where are my keys, Vera?" "We need to have a conversation about respect and family obligations," she said, settling into her favorite armchair like a queen on a throne. "You're not leaving until you understand how family works." "Give me my keys," I repeated, keeping my voice level despite the panic rising in my throat. "Declan and I have discussed your attitude problem," she continued, ignoring my request entirely. "You make good money at that hospital, but you're selfish with it. Family takes care of family, Sienna. Your paycheck should go toward building our collective future, not funding your little independence fantasy." I looked at Declan on the couch. His breathing was suspiciously even, his body positioned too perfectly for someone actually asleep. He knew. He'd been part of this ambush from the beginning. "This is illegal," I said, my voice shaking now with anger rather than fear. "You can't hold someone against their will." "Don't be dramatic," Vera laughed. "I'm not holding you. You're free to leave anytime. You just won't be taking my son's car." She dangled my keys from her finger. "These keys to the car Declan bought. The car that's in his name. Technically, you're the one stealing if you take it without permission." The car had been a gift from Declan before we married. He'd put it in his name because my credit was recovering from student loans, and he'd gotten a better interest rate. Another decision that seemed reasonable at the time, but was now a trap. "Fine," I said, pulling out my phone. "I'll call a rideshare." "No signal," Vera said with fake sympathy. "These old houses have terrible reception. You'll have to use my landline if you want to make a call." I tried my phone. She was right. 1 bar, and it kept dropping. When I attempted to call an Uber anyway, the app wouldn't load. My phone was essentially useless. "Just sit down," Vera said, patting the couch next to sleeping Declan. "We'll have a nice chat about how marriage means sacrifice and compromise, about how a good wife supports her husband's family, about how your nursing degree doesn't make you better than us." That's when I made my decision. I walked to Vera's front door, opened it, and stepped out into the pouring rain. She called after me, laughing, saying I'd be back within 5 minutes, soaked and ready to listen. She didn't know I'd run cross-country in high school. 4 miles in the rain was nothing compared to what I'd endured in practice. Now, standing in my father's living room, watching his face process the full scope of what Vera had done, I feel something shift inside me. This isn't about keys or money anymore. This is about control, about power, about a woman who thinks she can trap someone in her home and force compliance through psychological manipulation. Dad hands me a towel without a word, then walks to his study. I hear drawers opening, papers rustling. When he returns, he's holding a business card. "This is my lawyer," he says, his voice still that dangerous quiet. "We're calling her right now. What Vera did is false imprisonment. It's a crime. Dad, I don't want to—" "This isn't about what you want anymore," he interrupts, and I see in his eyes the same fury I feel. "This is about making sure she never thinks she can do this to anyone again." My phone buzzes. A text from Declan, finally awake now that I'm gone. "Where did you go? Mom says you stormed out being dramatic. Come back and apologize." I show Dad the message. His jaw clenches. "Before you call my lawyer," he says slowly, deliberately, "I need you to tell me everything. Every boundary she's violated. Every manipulation. Every time Declan sided with her over you. Because we're not just stopping this from happening again. We're making sure they both understand exactly what they've lost." And as I sit down at Dad's kitchen table, still dripping rainwater onto his floor, I start talking. And I don't stop until he knows everything. Every single thing that's led to this moment. Because Vincent's right. This isn't just about today. This is about making sure Vera learns a lesson she'll never forget. What Declan and his mother don't know yet is that I'm not the scared, compliant daughter-in-law they think they've trapped. I'm a woman with excellent credit, a solid career, a supportive father who happens to have connections throughout the legal community, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The rain drums against Dad's kitchen window as I lay out 2 years of systematic abuse disguised as family bonding. Vincent takes notes on a legal pad, his handwriting getting sharper and more aggressive with each revelation I share. His lawyer, Patricia Reeves, arrives within 30 minutes despite the weather, her BMW splashing through puddles in the driveway. Patricia is in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of presence that makes people instinctively straighten their posture. She records my statement on her phone, occasionally stopping me to ask clarifying questions that make me realize just how calculated Vera's behavior has been. "The key confiscation is false imprisonment," Patricia says, reviewing her notes. "The financial coercion attempts could constitute economic abuse. The unauthorized entry into your home is criminal trespassing, even with a key. And your husband's complicity in today's incident makes him an accessory." My phone explodes with messages. 17 texts from Declan, progressing from confusion to anger to accusations. Vera apparently told him I had a breakdown and ran out into the storm for attention. He wants me to come back immediately and apologize to his mother for being disrespectful. Don't respond yet, Patricia advises. Let me make some calls first. While she steps into Dad's study, Vincent makes tea with the methodical precision of a man channeling rage into productivity. He's a high school principal, used to dealing with difficult situations diplomatically, but I can see in the tension of his shoulders that his diplomacy has limits. I never liked him, Dad says quietly, setting a mug in front of me. Declan, from the first time you brought him home, something felt off. The way he'd answer for you before you could speak. How he'd steer conversations away from your accomplishments toward his mother's approval. Why didn't you say anything? Because you seemed happy, he admits. And I thought maybe I was being overprotective. Your mother died when you were so young. I second-guessed every instinct about your relationships, worried I couldn't judge correctly without her perspective. His voice cracks slightly. I should have trusted my gut. Patricia returns with predatory satisfaction in her eyes. I spoke with Judge Morrison. We've known each other 20 years. He's issuing an emergency protective order based on the false imprisonment. Declan and Vera must stay at least 500 feet from you, your workplace, and this residence. Violation results in immediate arrest. That fast? I'm stunned. The crime happened 3 hours ago. You have physical evidence of walking 4 miles in a storm to escape, and you gave a recorded statement while the trauma is fresh. This is textbook false imprisonment with witnesses to your distress. Patricia's smile is sharp. Your father-in-law, by the way, was home during the incident. I plan to depose him about what he heard and saw. I'd forgotten about Gerald. Vera's husband is a quiet man who spends most family gatherings in his garage workshop, avoiding his wife's dramatics. He'd been home today, somewhere in the house, while Vera held me hostage. My phone rings. Declan. I look at Patricia, who nods permission to answer on speaker. Where the hell are you? Declan's voice is sharp with irritation. Mom is upset. You embarrassed her by leaving like a child throwing a tantrum. Your mother committed a crime, I say evenly. She held me against my will by taking my keys and blocking my ability to call for help. Don't be ridiculous. She was trying to have a conversation with you. You're the one who decided to be dramatic and walk home in a storm. I walked to my father's house because I was imprisoned in your mother's home and saw no other option for escape. Imprisoned? Declan laughs. You're insane. You know that? You need therapy for this persecution complex. Patricia takes my phone. Mr. Walsh, this is Patricia Reeves, attorney at law. I'm recording this call. Please be aware that an emergency protective order has been issued against you and your mother. You are not to contact Sienna directly or indirectly, approach within 500 feet of her, or communicate with her in any form. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Silence. Then, you called a lawyer over Mom wanting to talk? Your mother committed false imprisonment, a criminal offense. The police will be contacting you shortly for your statement. I recommend you retain counsel. Patricia ends the call. Within minutes, my phone lights up with calls from Vera, from Declan, from numbers I don't recognize. Patricia silences my phone and hands it back. Let them panic. Panic makes people sloppy. Dad's doorbell rings. 2 police officers stand on the porch, rain dripping from their uniforms. They take my statement again, photograph the clothes I walked in, still damp and muddy, and collect my phone to document the progression of messages from Declan and Vera. Officer Martinez, a woman about my age with kind eyes, explains the process. We'll go to the Walsh residence to serve the protective order and take their statements. Given the evidence, the district attorney will likely file charges. False imprisonment is a felony in this state. After they leave, I sit in Dad's guest room, wrapped in my old high school sweatshirt, and finally let myself process what happened. Vera actually believed she could trap me in her home and force me to comply with her financial demands. Declan actively participated by faking sleep, making himself unavailable to defend me or provide escape. The betrayal cuts deeper than the imprisonment itself. I'd stood at an altar and promised to build a life with Declan. I'd trusted him to be my partner, my advocate, my safe place. Instead, he'd weaponized that trust, conspiring with his mother to control me through isolation and coercion. Patricia returns to the guest room with her laptop. I need to ask you something important. Do you want to stay married to Declan? The question hangs in the air. 24 hours ago, I would have said yes, that we just needed counseling, that his mother was the problem. Now, having seen him fake sleep while I was held captive, having heard him laugh at my fear and call me insane, I know the truth. Declan isn't a victim of his mother's manipulation. He's a willing participant. No, I say. I don't. Good, because I'm going to destroy them legally, and it'll be easier without emotional complications. Patricia's fingers fly across her keyboard. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning, citing abuse and requesting full separation of assets. The car in his name? We'll address that. The apartment? We'll address that. Every single asset they think they control, we'll fight for. I don't care about the car, I start to say. It's not about the car, Patricia interrupts. It's about establishing a pattern of financial control and abuse. Every piece of evidence supports your case and strengthens the criminal charges against Vera. We're building a narrative where you're the victim who escaped, not the dramatic wife who overreacted. Dad brings dinner, homemade soup that I can barely taste through the numbness. While I eat, Patricia explains her strategy. She's requesting expedited divorce proceedings based on the protective order. She's filing a civil suit against Vera for emotional distress, false imprisonment, and harassment. She's ensuring that every asset Declan and I acquired during our marriage is scrutinized. What about my job? I ask suddenly. Vera knows where I work. The protective order covers your workplace, Patricia assures me. If she shows up, she's arrested immediately. I'll also contact hospital security tomorrow to ensure they have copies of the order and photos of both Vera and Declan. My phone, now unmuted for Patricia to monitor, buzzes with a new message. This time from Gerald, Vera's husband. I heard everything today. I'm sorry. She's gone too far this time. Patricia screenshots the message immediately. Gold. Pure gold. The husband admitting he heard everything. What does that mean? It means we have a witness who can testify that Vera intentionally confined you. His statement will corroborate yours and potentially lead to his cooperation in the criminal case. The night stretches long and surreal. I sleep fitfully in my childhood bed, surrounded by faded posters and high school trophies, feeling both 16 and ancient. Every time I close my eyes, I see Vera's smile, hear Declan's fake snoring, feel the rain soaking through my clothes as I walked away from my marriage. Morning brings clarity and rage in equal measure. Patricia arrives at 8 with coffee and a thick folder of documents. The divorce petition is filed. I'm also requesting a restraining order extension, full disclosure of all financial accounts, and immediate separation of assets. Declan will be served at his workplace today. He'll be humiliated, I say, and I'm surprised to find I don't care. Good. Humiliation is mild compared to what you experienced. By noon, my phone explodes with messages from Declan's coworkers, family friends, and distant relatives. Word has spread that I've filed for divorce and obtained a protective order. The narrative from Vera's side is predictable. I'm mentally unstable, vindictive, trying to destroy a good family because I can't handle normal mother-in-law dynamics. But Patricia has been busy too. She's leaked selected details to a reporter friend, a woman who specializes in domestic abuse cases. By evening, the local news runs a segment on financial coercion in marriages, featuring anonymous interviews with experts discussing warning signs. While I'm not named, anyone following the story can connect the dots. Dad's house becomes my fortress. He takes a week off work to stay with me, his presence a silent guard against the chaos swirling outside. Friends from the hospital call, offering support. My supervisor sends a message saying I should take whatever time I need, that my shifts are covered. The criminal case moves faster than I expected. Officer Martinez calls to say Vera and Declan have been charged with false imprisonment and conspiracy. Gerald gave a statement confirming he heard Vera refuse to return my keys and heard me asking repeatedly to leave. He testified that Declan was awake and aware of the situation, despite his later claims of being asleep. Gerald filed for divorce too, Martinez adds. Said he's been watching Vera's behavior escalate for years and your situation was his wake-up call. The dominoes are falling. Vera's control over her family, maintained through manipulation and intimidation, is crumbling. Declan's image as a devoted son is exposed as codependence and abuse by proxy. And I, the daughter-in-law they tried to break, am building a new life from the ashes of their betrayal. Patricia calls with an update that makes me smile for the first time in days. Declan wants to negotiate. He's willing to give you the car, split the apartment deposit, and agree to an uncontested divorce if you'll drop the criminal charges against his mother. I can't drop criminal charges, I say. The state is prosecuting, not me. Exactly. But he doesn't understand that, which tells me his lawyer isn't very good. We're going to use his desperation. Patricia's voice is pure predatory satisfaction. I'll tell him we'll consider cooperation in exchange for full asset division in your favor, his public apology, and his testimony against Vera. He'll refuse, feel like he won by not testifying, and we'll still get everything we want in the divorce because the criminal case stands regardless. That's brilliant, Dad says, listening on speaker. That's experience, Patricia corrects. Men like Declan think they're smarter than everyone else. We're about to teach him otherwise. The week ends with me moving into a small apartment near the hospital, a furnished place that's temporary but mine. Dad helps me move the few belongings I'd kept at his house, mostly clothes and personal items. Everything else, every piece of my married life, stays in the apartment I shared with Declan. Standing in my new living room, boxes stacked around me, I feel something unfamiliar. Freedom. Not happiness. Not yet. But the absence of constant vigilance. No one will enter my space without permission. No one will monitor my finances or question my choices. No one will trap me and call it love. My phone buzzes. A message from an unknown number. You think you've won, but you've just made everything worse for yourself. Patricia's response is immediate when I forward it. Forward all threats to me and Officer Martinez. They're digging their own graves. The criminal trial is set for 2 months out, but the pre-trial maneuvering begins immediately. Patricia files motion after motion, each one designed to tighten the legal noose around Vera and Declan. Discovery requests reveal financial documents I never knew existed, joint accounts in Vera and Declan's names, credit cards I never authorized, loan applications using my information without my signature. This is identity theft, Patricia says, spreading the documents across her office conference table. They've been planning to take control of your finances for months. The Sunday lunch imprisonment wasn't spontaneous. It was the culmination of a long-term scheme. The evidence is staggering. Vera had researched legal guardianship laws, apparently believing that if I could be declared financially irresponsible, she could petition for control over my assets through Declan. She'd consulted with a sketchy lawyer about protecting family resources from a spendthrift spouse. She'd even drafted a budget showing how my nursing salary would be properly allocated under her management. She was trying to adult conservatorship you, Patricia explains. It's a tactic abusers use when they can't control their victims through traditional means. If she could establish you were mentally unfit to manage money, Declan could petition for financial guardianship, essentially making you a legal dependent. The realization makes my skin crawl. The comments about my attitude problem, the suggestions that I needed therapy, the attempts to isolate me from my father and friends, it was all groundwork for a legal strategy to strip away my autonomy. Can she actually do that? I ask, horrified. Not successfully, not with your employment history and clear competence. But she could make your life hell trying. The court process alone would be traumatic, expensive, and damaging to your reputation. Patricia's expression hardens. That's why we're not just defending, we're annihilating. The divorce proceedings reveal more ugliness. Declan fights everything. The asset division, the protective order extension, even my request to remove his name from my emergency contact forms at work. His lawyer argues I'm being vindictive, that the imprisonment was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Then Gerald's testimony emerges. In his deposition, Vera's soon-to-be ex-husband describes years of watching his wife manipulate their son, drive away Declan's previous girlfriends through manufactured drama, and systematically undermine any relationship that threatened her control. He confirms hearing Vera tell Declan the night before the Sunday lunch that they needed to break Sienna's stubborn streak once and for all. She said if they could make you desperate enough, you'd cave on the financial arrangement, Gerald testifies, his voice heavy with guilt. Declan suggested taking your keys. Vera refined it into the whole imprisonment scenario. I should have warned you. I should have stopped them. I didn't, and I'll regret that forever. His testimony destroys any remaining defense. Premeditation elevates the charges. Conspiracy confirms Declan's full participation. The prosecution offers Vera and Declan a plea deal. Plead guilty to false imprisonment, accept probation and mandatory counseling, or go to trial facing additional charges of identity theft and fraud. Vera refuses. She genuinely believes she did nothing wrong, that enforcing family values isn't a crime, that I'm the villain in this story. Her lawyer withdraws from the case, citing irreconcilable differences with his client. The new lawyer she finds is barely competent, a recent graduate with no trial experience who seems terrified of Patricia. Declan wavers. He wants to take the plea, but Vera forbids it, saying it would be betraying family. The psychological hold she has on him is complete. He'd rather face felony conviction than disappoint his mother. My life, meanwhile, begins to rebuild. The hospital offers me a permanent position in their new pediatric intensive care unit, a promotion I'd been working toward for years. The timing feels like vindication. While Vera tries to paint me as incompetent, my employer demonstrates confidence in my abilities with increased responsibility and salary. I move from the furnished apartment into a one-bedroom place with actual furniture I choose myself. Dad helps me pick out a couch, arguing good-naturedly about whether the blue or gray fabric is more practical. These small moments of normalcy feel revolutionary after years of having every decision questioned or overruled. Therapy becomes my anchor. Dr. Chen specializes in trauma recovery and helps me process not just the imprisonment, but the slow erosion of my autonomy that preceded it. She explains how abuse works in increments, how each small boundary violation paves the way for larger ones, how victims often don't recognize the pattern until something dramatic forces recognition. The imprisonment was a gift in a twisted way, Dr. Chen says during one session. It was so egregious that you couldn't rationalize it. It broke through the cognitive dissonance that might have kept you trapped for years. The trial date approaches. Patricia prepares me for testimony, drilling me on staying calm under cross-examination, focusing on facts rather than emotions, maintaining credibility. She's confident but realistic about the challenges. Juries sympathize with mothers, she warns. Vera's lawyer will try to paint her as a concerned parent protecting her son from a gold digger. We counter that with your financial independence, your career success, and the evidence of their attempted financial fraud, but be prepared for ugly accusations. The weekend before trial, I drive past the house where Declan and I lived. Someone else's car is in the parking space. He's moved back with Vera, unable or unwilling to maintain independence now that I'm gone. The symbolism isn't lost on me. He's regressed completely to her control, proving that our marriage was never really about partnership. My phone buzzes. A message from Patricia. Declan cracked. He's taking the plea deal against Vera's wishes, testifying against her for reduced sentence. Trial still on, but our case just became bulletproof. The betrayal must be devastating for Vera. The son she controlled absolutely, who she convinced to trap his own wife, has chosen self-preservation over loyalty. But I can't muster sympathy. She created a dynamic where betrayal was currency. Now she's facing the bill. Friends from my past, people I'd drifted from during my marriage, reach out with support. Several admit they'd been worried about me, noticed changes in my personality, saw warning signs but didn't know how to help without pushing me away. Their honesty stings but heals simultaneously. I wasn't crazy to feel trapped. Others noticed too. One friend, Marissa, a fellow nurse, confesses over coffee. You stopped coming to happy hours. You stopped talking about anything except what Declan or his mother thought. You'd check your phone constantly like you were afraid of missing important messages. We thought maybe you were just busy with married life. But looking back, the isolation was deliberate. The pattern becomes clear through others' observations. Vera systematically cut me off from support systems, making me dependent on family approval. Declan reinforced it by scheduling conflicts during my social events, or sulking when I chose friends over his mother. The imprisonment wasn't an isolated incident. It was the inevitable conclusion of escalating control. The day before trial, I visit Dad's classroom after school. He's grading papers at his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, looking exactly as he did throughout my childhood. The familiar scene grounds me. I'm terrified, I admit. What if the jury believes Vera? What if they think I'm exaggerating? Dad removes his glasses, giving me his full attention. Then you walk out of that courtroom knowing you told the truth. But Sienna, you won't need to worry. Patricia is a shark. The evidence is overwhelming. And tomorrow, you're going to stand up in front of strangers and prove that you can't be silenced. What if I cry on the stand? Then you cry. Emotion doesn't negate truth. He stands, pulling me into a hug. Your mother would be so proud of you. Leaving took more courage than staying ever could have. That night, I lay out my clothes for court. A navy suit, professional but not intimidating, pearl earrings that had been my mother's. I practice my testimony in the mirror, keeping my voice steady, my facts straight. Patricia's words echo. Don't perform. Just remember. Just tell them what happened. Sleep comes fitfully. I dream of locked doors and missing keys, of running through endless hallways where every exit leads back to Vera's living room. I wake before dawn, heart racing, and find a text from Patricia sent at 3 a.m. Tomorrow we show them who you really are. Not a victim, a survivor who fought back. The courthouse looms gray and imposing under overcast skies. Patricia meets me at the entrance, her armor in place, tailored suit, briefcase, expression of absolute confidence. Inside, we pass through security and enter the courtroom where my marriage will be publicly dissected and Vera's control will be challenged. Vera sits at the defense table, her lawyer whispering urgently to her. She's dressed conservatively, playing the respectable mother role. But when our eyes meet, I see the same predatory satisfaction she wore when she took my keys. She still thinks she'll win. Declan sits in the witness area, not meeting anyone's gaze. His plea deal requires his testimony, but the guilt radiates from his slumped shoulders. Or maybe it's just fear of his mother's reaction. Judge Morrison enters, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and no-nonsense demeanor. She's heard Patricia speak about the case's particulars in chambers, and her expression suggests she's already formed opinions about Vera's defense strategy. The state calls Sienna Moore to the stand, the prosecutor announces, and Patricia squeezes my hand once before I stand. Walking to the witness box, I feel the weight of every eye in the courtroom, but I also feel something else, righteous fury. Vera tried to break me. She failed. And now she's going to hear exactly how badly she miscalculated. I place my hand on the Bible, swear to tell the truth, and sit down. The prosecutor smiles encouragingly. Ms. Moore, can you tell us what happened on the afternoon of Sunday, October 15th? And I begin to speak. My testimony lasts 2 hours. The prosecutor walks me through every detail chronologically. The invitation to Sunday lunch, the seemingly pleasant meal, Declan's suspicious nap, discovering my keys missing, Vera's explicit statement that I couldn't leave until I submitted to her financial demands. I describe her smile, her casual body language, the way she dangled the keys like a dog treat. And what did you do when you realized she wouldn't return your keys? The prosecutor asks. I checked my phone and found I had no signal. When I asked to use her landline, Vera made it clear she would only allow calls that served her purposes. I felt I had no choice but to walk 4 miles in a thunderstorm to reach safety at my father's house. Why not wait for your husband to wake up and help you? This is the crucial question. Because I realized Declan wasn't actually asleep. His positioning was too perfect, his breathing too controlled. When I'd arrived and he'd immediately collapsed on the couch, I'd thought he was tired from a long work week. But after Vera took my keys, I understood it was coordinated. He was pretending so his mother could control the situation without him having to overtly choose sides. The prosecutor displays photos of my rain-soaked clothes, my muddy shoes, the route I walked. Medical records show mild hypothermia and exhaustion treated at my father's insistence. Cell phone records confirm I tried unsuccessfully to call for help. Then comes Gerald's testimony. Vera's ex-husband takes the stand looking 10 years older than when I last saw him. He describes hearing the entire conversation from his workshop, hearing me repeatedly ask for my keys, hearing Vera explicitly refuse and state I would stay until I learned respect. "Why didn't you intervene?" the prosecutor asks. Gerald's voice breaks. "Because I'm a coward. I spent 28 years watching Vera manipulate everyone around her, and I convinced myself it wasn't my place to interfere. When I heard what she was doing to Sienna, I knew it had gone too far, but I was afraid if I helped her escape, Vera would turn on me next." He looks at me directly. "I'm sorry. You deserved better from someone who claimed to be family." Vera's inadequate lawyer cross-examines Gerald aggressively, trying to paint him as a disgruntled ex-husband seeking revenge through false testimony. But Gerald's statement to police, given before he filed for divorce, corroborates every detail of my account. His motivation isn't revenge, it's guilt. Declan's testimony comes next, and the courtroom tension thickens. He's sworn to tell the truth as part of his plea agreement, but his loyalty to Vera is evident in every reluctant answer. "Mr. Walsh, were you asleep on your mother's couch the afternoon of October 15th? Declan hesitates. "Not exactly. Please clarify for the court." "I was resting with my eyes closed. Could you hear the conversation between your wife and your mother?" Another pause. "Some of it. Did you hear your wife ask for her car keys?" "Yes." "Did you hear your mother refuse to return them?" "She wasn't refusing. She was trying to have a conversation." The prosecutor's voice sharpens. "Did you hear your wife state clearly and repeatedly that she wanted to leave?" "Yes." "Did you assist her in leaving?" "I thought if I stayed out of it, they'd work it out themselves." "So you heard your wife asking for her keys, heard your mother refusing to return them, and you did nothing?" "My mother wasn't dangerous. She just wanted to talk." "Mr. Walsh, your wife walked 4 miles in a thunderstorm to escape your mother's house. Does that sound like someone who felt safe continuing a conversation?" Declan has no answer. His testimony, meant to be minimally damaging to Vera through his plea agreement, instead reinforces the prosecution's narrative. His passivity enabled the imprisonment. His refusal to intervene confirmed the conspiracy. During my cross-examination, Vera's lawyer attempts to paint me as dramatic and vindictive. She questions why I didn't simply agree to have a conversation, why I chose to walk in dangerous weather, whether I exaggerated the circumstances to punish my mother-in-law for normal family disagreements. But Patricia has prepared me well. I respond calmly, factually, without emotion that can be twisted into instability. When asked why I didn't just talk to Vera about her concerns, I reply, "Because she'd physically confiscated my means of leaving and explicitly stated I wouldn't get them back until I complied with her demands. That's not a conversation. That's coercion." When asked if I'm seeking attention through this prosecution, I respond, "I'm seeking justice, and I'm seeking to ensure Vera understands that trapping someone against their will has consequences." The lawyer tries one more angle. "Isn't it true you refused to contribute financially to your husband's family?" I refused to hand control of my paycheck to my mother-in-law. My income from nursing paid our rent, utilities, groceries, and my student loans. I contributed significantly to our household. What I wouldn't do is give Vera unrestricted access to my bank account. "Because you're selfish with money?" Patricia objects, argumentative and calls for speculation. "Sustained," Judge Morrison says sharply. "Counsel, rephrase, or move on." The lawyer tries again. "Why wouldn't you trust your mother-in-law with financial matters?" "Because she'd already demonstrated a pattern of violating boundaries. She entered my home without permission, threw away my belongings, and attempted to control my daily life. Adding financial control would have completed my dependency on her. I refuse to allow that." When I step down from the witness box, I catch Vera's expression. For the first time, her confidence wavers. She's hearing her behavior described plainly, clinically, and it sounds exactly like what it is: abuse. The prosecution rests its case. Vera's lawyer calls character witnesses, friends from church, neighbors who describe her as helpful and kind. But under cross-examination, these witnesses admit they never saw how Vera treated family members behind closed doors. Their testimony about her public persona actually reinforces the prosecution's argument that abusers often maintain careful public images. Vera testifies in her own defense, and it's a disaster. She genuinely can't understand why what she did was wrong. She describes Sienna as disrespectful and ungrateful, talks about how much she'd welcomed me into the family, expresses hurt that I wouldn't trust her with financial guidance. When the prosecutor asks directly if she took my keys, Vera admits it. I needed her to listen. She was always so busy, so unwilling to hear wisdom from someone with more life experience. So you physically prevented her from leaving your home? I temporarily held on to property that belonged to my son so I could have an uninterrupted conversation with my daughter-in-law about family responsibilities. Ms. Walsh, did Sienna ask for her keys back? She was being dramatic. Did she ask? Yes or no? Yes. But did you refuse to return them? I was teaching her about respect. By trapping her in your home against her will? Vera's face flushes. I didn't trap anyone. She could have stayed and had a civil conversation like an adult. She tried to leave. You prevented it by confiscating her keys, correct? I held on to my son's property. The car keys that Sienna used daily, that provided her transportation to work and personal activities, you took those keys and refused to return them unless she submitted to your demands. Is that accurate? Vera realizes she's been backed into a corner. Family means making sacrifices. She needed to learn that. The prosecutor lets the statement hang in the air. The jury's expressions range from disgust to disbelief. Vera genuinely believes she had the right to imprison someone to enforce her values. Closing arguments crystallize the case. The prosecution summarizes the evidence: premeditation, conspiracy, false imprisonment, identity theft attempts. They emphasize that abuse often hides behind family values language, that control disguised as concern is still control. Vera's lawyer attempts to argue misunderstanding and good intentions, but the evidence is too damning, Vera's own testimony too revealing. By the time both sides rest, the outcome feels inevitable. The jury deliberates for 3 hours. When they return, the foreperson stands and Judge Morrison asks for the verdict. On the charge of false imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. Vera gasps. Declan closes his eyes. I feel Patricia's hand squeeze mine under the table. On the charge of conspiracy to commit false imprisonment, we find the defendant guilty. The additional charges, attempted identity theft, fraud, receive the same verdict, guilty on all counts. Judge Morrison schedules sentencing for 2 weeks out. Vera is remanded to custody pending sentencing, her bail revoked due to flight risk. As officers escort her from the courtroom, she turns to look at Declan, her face a mixture of betrayal and disbelief. You did this, she hisses at him. You chose her over your own mother. Declan doesn't respond. He just stares at his hands, the weight of his choices finally registering. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarm. Patricia handles them efficiently while Dad shields me from cameras. We escape to Patricia's office, where she opens a bottle of champagne. You did it, she says, pouring 3 glasses. You stood up, told the truth, and won. But it doesn't feel like victory yet. It feels like relief, like the first full breath after drowning. What happens now? I ask. Now? Patricia's smile is fierce. Now we make sure Vera understands exactly what she lost. Vera's sentencing hearing arrives on a cold morning 2 weeks after the verdict. The courtroom fills with people whose lives she touched. Gerald, several of Declan's ex-girlfriends who've come forward with their own stories of Vera's interference, co-workers who witnessed her controlling behavior. The prosecution has compiled a victim impact portfolio that paints a decades-long pattern of manipulation and abuse. Judge Morrison reviews the evidence before sentencing, her expression grave. Ms. Walsh, this court has heard testimony about a pattern of controlling behavior that culminated in the false imprisonment of your daughter-in-law. You've shown no remorse, no understanding of why your actions were criminal. You continue to believe you were justified in trapping someone in your home against their will. Vera stands rigid, her lawyer beside her. I was protecting my family. You were exerting illegal control? Judge Morrison corrects. The court sentences you to 3 years in state prison for false imprisonment, 2 years for conspiracy to run consecutively, and 2 years for attempted identity theft to run concurrently. Total sentence, 5 years, with possibility of parole after serving 80%. Vera's face drains of color. 5 years? For trying to have a conversation with my daughter-in-law? For imprisoning her, conspiring with your son to do so, and attempting to steal her identity to gain financial control. This court takes domestic abuse seriously, regardless of whether it occurs between spouses, parents, and children, or in-laws. You will have ample time in prison to reflect on boundaries and consent. As officers escort Vera away, she screams at me across the courtroom, "You destroyed my family. You turned my son against me. You vindictive witch." Judge Morrison's gavel cracks. "Ms. Walsh, one more outburst and I'll add contempt charges." Vera is dragged out still screaming. The courtroom erupts in murmurs. Patricia leans over and whispers, "Her outburst just guaranteed the parole board will see her as unrepentant. She'll serve the full 5 years." Declan's sentencing comes next. His plea deal reduced charges to accessory after the fact and conspiracy. His cooperation secured a lighter sentence: 18 months in county jail, 3 years probation, mandatory counseling. But Judge Morrison adds her own stipulations. "Mr. Walsh, you betrayed your wife in the most fundamental way. You conspired with your mother to trap her, refused to help her escape, then gaslighted her about the severity of what occurred. Your sentence includes a no-contact order with Sienna Moore, permanent and enforceable even after probation ends. You will never contact her again. Understood?" "Yes, Your Honor." Declan's voice is hollow. "Additionally, you will surrender all marital assets to Ms. Moore as part of the divorce settlement. The car, the security deposits, any shared accounts. You participated in a felony against your spouse. You forfeit any claim to shared property." Patricia smiles. We'd hoped for a fair division. Instead, Declan loses everything. After court, Patricia, Dad, and I retreat to a quiet restaurant. The champagne is better this time, the victory more complete. "What happens to Vera in prison?" I ask. "Reality," Patricia says. "She'll be surrounded by people who don't care about her opinion, don't owe her respect, and won't tolerate her controlling behavior. Prison will teach her lessons her family never could." The divorce finalization comes through 3 days later. I'm no longer Sienna Walsh. I reclaim my maiden name with relief. The car title transfers to my name. The apartment security deposit is refunded entirely to me. Even the furniture Declan and I purchased together becomes mine. He's in jail and has nowhere to put it anyway. I sell most of it. The furniture carries too many memories of the marriage I'm shedding. The only piece I keep is a bookshelf my father built, because it predates Declan and Vera and represents something untainted. My new apartment, larger now that I can afford it with my PICU promotion, becomes a sanctuary. I decorate it myself. Bold colors Vera would have hated. Modern furniture instead of the traditional style she'd pushed on me. Artwork from local artists who paint subjects that make me happy. Every choice is mine. Gerald reaches out 3 months after sentencing. He's rebuilt his life too. Moved across town, started a woodworking business, begun dating a kind woman who treats him as an equal. He asks if we can meet for coffee, not to apologize again, but to update me on something important. "Vera's been calling me from prison," he says, stirring sugar into his coffee. "She wants me to advocate for her release, to tell the parole board she's changed." "Has she?" "Not even a little. She's furious, entitled, and convinced everyone conspired against her. She wanted me to pressure you into writing a letter supporting early parole." "I assume you told her no?" Gerald smiles. "I told her I'd already written a letter to the parole board, explaining her decades of manipulation, the way she controlled Declan until he couldn't think independently, how she drove away everyone who cared about him. I detailed everything I witnessed that made me culpable through silence. I told them she's exactly where she belongs." His honesty is brutal and refreshing. "Thank you for telling me." "I also told Declan I'm done. He wrote me from jail asking me to help with his defense in some civil suit Vera's filing against you from prison. Some nonsense about defamation." Gerald shakes his head. "I told him he made his choices and he'll live with the consequences. I'm not enabling either of them anymore." The civil suit he mentioned is Vera's latest desperate attempt. From prison, using a jailhouse lawyer's help, she's filed a lawsuit claiming I defamed her character by testifying truthfully in court. Patricia dismisses it with a single motion, citing litigation privilege. Statements made in court proceedings are protected from defamation claims. She's losing what little money she has on legal fees for frivolous lawsuits, Patricia reports with satisfaction. Her assets are being drained by prison costs, lawyer fees, and court sanctions for filing clearly meritless claims. By the time she's released, she'll have nothing. Declan is released after serving 12 months with good behavior. I only know because Patricia monitors his release to ensure he complies with the no-contact order. He moves in with a former coworker, takes a job in a warehouse, and apparently starts attending therapy as mandated by his probation. I wonder sometimes if he's changed, if he's understood what he did. But mostly, I don't think about him at all. He's a chapter I closed, a lesson learned about trusting actions over words. 2 years after the trial, I'm promoted to PICU director. The hospital administration cites my leadership during a crisis period, my advocacy for patient families, and my commitment to staff welfare. The raise is substantial, the responsibility is rewarding, and the irony isn't lost on me. Vera tried to control my finances, and now I'm thriving financially beyond what she ever could have provided. Dad retires from teaching and moves closer to my new apartment. We have dinner every Sunday, reclaiming that tradition from the toxic version Vera imposed. We cook together, talk about everything and nothing, and never once does he try to control or manipulate me. It's what family should have been all along. I date cautiously. The trauma of Declan's betrayal makes trust difficult, but I'm patient with myself, refusing to rush into anything until I'm genuinely ready. Dr. Chen helps me recognize healthy relationship patterns, red flags to avoid, and the difference between support and control. When I do eventually meet someone, Marcus, an ER doctor with kind eyes and firm boundaries with his own family, I'm ready. He meets Dad early on, not because I need approval, but because transparency matters to me now. Their easy rapport assures me I'm choosing differently this time. 3 years after the trial, Patricia calls with unexpected news. Vera's up for parole. She wants you to know she's apologized to the board and accepted full responsibility for her actions. Has she actually changed? The board didn't believe her, denied parole. She'll serve the full sentence. The news should bring satisfaction, but mostly I feel nothing. Vera is irrelevant to my life now. Whether she rots in prison or gets released, she'll never touch me again. The no-contact order is permanent. My life has moved so far beyond her reach that her existence barely registers. Declan, I hear through mutual acquaintances, struggles. He lost his warehouse job for attendance issues, moved back to his hometown where Vera's reputation has destroyed the family name, and spends his time in online forums complaining about how the justice system ruined his life over a misunderstanding. He never takes responsibility, never acknowledges his active participation in imprisoning his own wife. He's exactly where he belongs. Alone, struggling, unable to maintain relationships because he never learned to see partners as equals rather than resources to control. His mother taught him everything she knew, and it left him permanently broken. 4 years after my escape through the rain, I sit in my comfortable apartment, surrounded by evidence of a life I built entirely on my own terms. The bookshelf Dad built holds medical texts, alongside novels Vera would have deemed frivolous. Photos of friends, Dad, and Marcus create a visual record of people who love me without conditions or demands. My phone buzzes. A message from a former colleague. Just heard Vera Walsh is being released next week. Thought you should know. I delete the message without responding. Vera's release date doesn't matter. She's forbidden from contacting me, from coming near my home or workplace, from entering my life in any capacity. If she violates that order, she returns immediately to prison. But more importantly, I'm not the same woman she trapped in her living room. That Sienna was still learning to recognize abuse, still willing to excuse controlling behavior as family dynamics. This Sienna knows exactly what healthy boundaries look like, and will defend them without hesitation or guilt. If Vera tries anything, she'll discover I'm no longer prey. I'm the woman who walked 4 miles in a thunderstorm rather than submit to control. I'm the woman who stood in court and testified without flinching. I'm the woman who rebuilt a life from rubble and made it better than the original. Marcus comes home from his shift, tired but smiling. Bad day? Just thinking about how far I've come. He understands. I've told him everything, and he's never once tried to minimize or explain away what happened. He just holds space for my healing and reminds me that not everyone who says they love you means love the way Vera and Declan meant it, as possession. You hungry? He asks. I could make dinner. I'll help. We cook together in comfortable silence, and I marvel at how simple healthy relationships are. No walking on eggshells. No checking phones anxiously. No wondering if normal requests will trigger manipulation. Just partnership, respect, and trust. Later, reading in bed with Marcus asleep beside me, I think about the woman I was 4 years ago. She would barely recognize this version of me, stronger, clearer, unafraid to demand what I deserve. Vera meant to break me. Instead, she forced me to discover exactly how resilient I could be. My phone buzzes one last time, an unknown number, but I recognize the pattern. It's from a prison email system. Vera's last attempt to reach me before her release. I block the number without reading the message. Whatever she has to say, I don't need to hear it. Her apologies, if they exist, come too late and matter too little. Her threats, if that's what she's sending, are empty. I'm free. Truly, completely free. And she can never trap me again. 5 years after I walked 4 miles in a thunderstorm to escape, my life looks nothing like what Vera tried to force me into, and everything like what I chose for myself. The PICU director position led to an unexpected opportunity. I'm now developing a hospital-wide program training staff to recognize domestic abuse in patient families. The hospital administration was so impressed with my proposal that they created the position specifically for me, Director of Family Advocacy Services. The salary is double what I made as a floor nurse. Vera wanted control of my paycheck. Instead, I'm thriving financially in ways she never imagined possible. Marcus and I married last year in a small ceremony at Dad's house, surrounded by people who genuinely love us. No mother-in-law drama, no family obligations beyond what we freely chose. Marcus's parents are kind, respectful people who understand boundaries. They call before visiting, respect our schedules, and treat me as their son's equal partner, not property to manage. Dad walked me down the makeshift aisle in his backyard, tears in his eyes. Your mother would be so proud, he whispered. Not just of what you survived, but of what you built after. Marissa and my other nursing friends were there, celebrating not just a wedding, but my transformation from the isolated, controlled woman they'd worried about to someone who radiates confidence and peace. Several made speeches about watching me reclaim my life, supporting each decision to prioritize my well-being over others' demands. Patricia attended too, bringing her wife in a gift, framed courtroom transcripts of my testimony. So you never forget how strong you are, she said. The gesture was perfect, evidence of my courage when I needed it most. Gerald came as well, bringing his wife and their obvious happiness. He pulled me aside during the reception to share news I'd been wondering about. Vera was released 4 months ago, he said quietly. She violated the no-contact order within a week. My stomach clenched. What did she do? Showed up at Declan's apartment demanding he help her get revenge on you. He recorded the conversation and called his probation officer immediately. She was arrested for violating the court order and for attempting to solicit conspiracy to commit harassment. So she's back in prison? For another 2 years, with the possibility of additional charges. The prosecutor is considering stalking charges based on her documented plans to target you. Gerald's expression was grim satisfaction. She'll be 70 before she's released again, and every violation extends her sentence. Vera couldn't help herself. Even after 5 years of prison, she emerged unchanged, still believing she had the right to control and punish me for defying her. The legal system is now handling her permanently. She'll spend the rest of her viable years cycling between freedom and incarceration because she physically cannot learn boundaries. Declan, according to Gerald, finally cut contact with his mother after her latest arrest. He realized she'd never change, that every time he helped her, she dragged him down. He's in intensive therapy, trying to unlearn 3 decades of manipulation. Do you think he'll succeed? I asked. Gerald shrugged. I hope so, but that's not your concern anymore. He's right. Declan's recovery isn't my responsibility. He made choices that destroyed our marriage and landed him in jail. Whether he rebuilds his life successfully is between him and his therapist. The advocacy program I developed has helped 17 families escape abusive situations so far. We train staff to spot warning signs, patients who defer all medical decisions to family members, those who seem afraid to disagree with companions, anyone whose family members display controlling behavior during hospital visits. We provide resources, connect people with legal aid, and create safety plans. Last month, a young mother broke down crying when I explained her husband's behavior during their child's hospital stay constituted abuse. I thought I was crazy, she sobbed. He kept telling me I was overreacting. I held her hand and shared my own story, not the details, but the core truth. Recognizing abuse is the first step to escaping it. She entered a shelter that night with her children. Her husband was arrested for violating the emergency protective order when he tried to force his way into her new residence. Each person we help feels like justice for what I endured. Vera tried to trap me. Instead, she unknowingly launched my career in freeing others from similar traps. Marcus and I are expecting our first child in 4 months, a daughter. We've already agreed she'll know the truth about my past, age-appropriate versions as she grows, the full story when she's old enough to understand. We want her to learn early that family isn't about obligation or control, but respect and choice. Dad is ecstatic about becoming a grandfather. He's already building furniture for the nursery, channeling his excitement into practical gifts. The crib he's making is beautiful, solid oak with careful joinery that will last generations. Your mother would want her granddaughter to have something made with love, he says, sanding the rails smooth. I think about my mother often now, trying to remember her face beyond photographs. She died when I was 8, too young for me to have learned from her example of healthy relationships. But Dad kept her alive through stories, describing a woman who was independent, strong-minded, and never tolerated disrespect. She would have seen through Vera immediately, Dad said once. Would have warned you before the wedding, but you had to learn those lessons yourself, painful as they were. Sometimes I drive past the neighborhood where Vera's house stands. The property looks neglected. Gerald sold his share in the divorce, and Vera's half is tied up in legal fees and restitution payments. The lawn is overgrown, the paint peeling. It looks as dead as the relationships that house destroyed. I never drive past the apartment Declan and I shared. That building represents a version of myself I've outgrown entirely. The woman who lived there, who walked on eggshells and second-guessed herself constantly, doesn't exist anymore. My new house with Marcus is everything that apartment wasn't. Spacious, filled with light, decorated with our combined choices. The nursery is painted yellow, gender-neutral and cheerful. Marcus's grandmother's rocking chair sits in the corner, next to the bookshelf Dad built. Old and new, chosen family and blood family, creating something beautiful. Patricia visited last week for lunch, bringing baby clothes and legal advice. I want to make sure your daughter is protected, she said, pulling out documents. Will, guardianship designations, trust funds. We're ensuring that if anything happened to you and Marcus, custody is crystal clear. No opportunity for Vera or Declan to ever claim parental rights or access. The precautions seem extreme, but Patricia's thoroughness has saved me before. We signed everything, creating legal barriers that protect my daughter from people who destroyed my peace once and won't get the chance again. How's your advocacy program going? Patricia asked over coffee. We're expanding to 3 more hospitals next quarter. The model is working. Early intervention, legal resources, safety planning. We've helped 43 people escape abusive situations in 18 months. Vera really screwed herself, Patricia mused. She tried to control you and ended up creating an expert in defeating people exactly like her. The irony is delicious. Vera's abuse taught me to recognize and dismantle controlling behavior professionally. Her imprisonment gave me the platform and credibility to advocate for others. Her continued violations keep her locked away from society. She created her own worst nightmare. A daughter-in-law she can't touch who's dedicated her career to helping others escape similar nightmares. Last month, I testified before the state legislature about proposed domestic abuse legislation. The committee was considering expanding false imprisonment laws to include financial coercion and other forms of control that don't involve physical violence. My testimony, drawn from personal experience and professional expertise, apparently carried weight. The bill passed with bipartisan support. Vera is serving time under laws that existed when she imprisoned me. Future victims will have even stronger protections thanks to legislation her own actions inspired. Her legacy is the opposite of what she intended. Instead of a controlled, submissive daughter-in-law, she created an advocate who's making it harder for people like her to operate. Sometimes people ask if I've forgiven her. The question always catches me off guard, because forgiveness implies she's relevant enough to my current life to require emotional processing. She's not. She's a criminal serving time for crimes she committed. I don't forgive her any more than I'd forgive a random stranger who broke into my home and assaulted me. Declan gets the same response when people ask about him. He's my ex-husband who participated in imprisoning me and faced legal consequences for that choice. Whether he's sorry, whether he's changed, whether he wants forgiveness, none of that concerns me. He's legally forbidden from contacting me, which suits me perfectly. The only people who matter are the ones who showed up when it counted. Dad, who drove through the night when I called from the hospital. Patricia, who fought for me when I was too traumatized to fight for myself. Marcus, who met me after I'd rebuilt and loved the strong woman I became, rather than the broken girl I'd been. Our daughter will grow up surrounded by people who model healthy relationships. She'll see her grandfather respect her mother's decisions. She'll watch her parents negotiate disagreements with respect and compromise. She'll learn that love means supporting, not controlling, and that family is defined by behavior, not blood. She'll also learn that escape is possible, that standing up for yourself is worth temporary discomfort, and that people who violate your boundaries don't deserve access to your life no matter what their relationship is. If Vera and Declan taught me anything valuable, it's that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who treat you as property to manage rather than person to respect. I walked 4 miles in a thunderstorm 5 years ago. I'd walk 100 miles in a hurricane before I'd ever let someone trap me again. And now, with my daughter on the way, my career flourishing, and my life completely my own, I can honestly say Vera did me a favor. She pushed so hard to break me that she forced me to discover exactly how strong I could be. She's in prison. I'm free. And that's the only ending this story ever needed.